having done something at work where I left off $40,000 and I was a little sensitive to that.
Hopefully it was such a large number that there was, that you should absorb it, but I doubt it. Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Taking into account any changes in hours, changes in personnel.
Yeah, we can dig into each of those, yeah, but understanding it.
Just not 100% clear exactly what you're looking for then?
If you looked, say, I don't know if you want it by department or just
Yeah.
I
general
would say-
government or public safety, et cetera, or if you want just total.
I think it's all that. It's all that. So you're able to sort of see by department, what was last year's salary and wages, and what's it go up to this year. So you can see, what's that, you know, yes, there's the grid, yes, there's the COLA, yes, there's people leaving and people coming. So it's not apples to apples, but at least you're looking at, and generally, what's that overall gross effect?
That I think you see in this
Yeah,
omnibus budget.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking
Yeah, we
That
get that.
department by department you see in the omnibus
Yeah, I thought you were
budget.
trying to roll it up.
Well, yeah,
Both.
and
It's-
then bring it
and
up.
And then bringing it to the total, exactly.
Yeah, you know, like the FinCom salary and wages are up 4.8%. You know, if you just read it right off the
Yeah.
omnibus budget. And police,
$66.
yeah, you know, the police salary and wages is up 2.95%, but
That's a plug. Right?
that's
That's
without
without-
settled contracts.
Right.
So,
Right.
I'm just reading it off of
Yeah.
Catherine's sheet. Fire salary and wages are only up 0.5%, but again, that's without a settled contract, so you could expect that to change.
So, I mean, it's the sum of all of those that really is, ultimately, what are we paying in wages and what did we pay last year?
In the total. Yeah, it's certainly possible to do that, but like I said, only cut the number after it's.
I just want to check forward.
Yeah,
And check the captain as well.
So
Until we get to
currently on
spec, we won't know. Have
the,
more plugs.
on the budget
That's
form
what we
one, the
need to have.
spreadsheet, so it does offer what was the actual of FY17, appropriate FY18, and then
Yeah.
what's being requested in FY19 by personnel.
Yeah. What,
Add those all up.
yeah, so add those all up as
Oh.
one. The other thing though, then highlight, here are the ones that are plus. Meaning like the police and fire departments, because they're under contract negotiations. You know, those that are the,
Until they're settled, you don't know.
we don't know, but right now there's a number in there, whether it's 0 or it's, you know, $100,000 or what, but that then we can model off of that. What,
Salary reserves
two,
are
I mean,
$100,000.
ultimately, if nothing else, going forward, it gives us the ability to model what the impact is of our
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so,
negotiation
yeah.
and the overall budget.
Okay. And the other thing that catches, sometimes they're moving someone from salary to wages and that throws off the
Yes.
line item.
That's why I don't,
Yeah.
you don't distinguish.
Yeah,
In fact,
But
I don't
it's-
think we do anymore when we vote Article 3, we
Right.
combined it,
I think he's right, I'm just sort of the numbers up.
people are people.
And is that all town, non-school, or is it by just the Board of Selectmen departments? Is it by, I mean, you could, depending on your
However.
ultimate goal, you could slice it up into a million pieces. All these different departments have different reporting structures and appointing authorities. So what would be your hope to use the information? Is it just for projection purposes? Is it for approving individual budgets?
Personally, I see three purposes. One is projection, and two is to get to those boards so that they do know, those decision makers do know what the impact of their decision, which they already ought to have, or at least then we'd be comfortable, I'd be comfortable that they know
And we know.
that
The
this is
contracts,
percentage.
the contracts in question then are all Board of Selectmen. Because
Right,
the schools
right.
know their own,
Right.
the elementary schools know.
Right,
their
and
own.
we have no control over their
The schools
process,
don't.
whereas carving them out for this process, makes it
Yeah,
Well, I think,
volatile.
put it, here's, if you can, we can take the school and put them as their own. And take all the ones the board of selectmen have this, decision-making on, both contractual and annual. I think those are three different, I mean, those are your decision points, right? Your decision point is board of selectmen get to make a choice on contractual arrangements every couple of years. They get to support recommendations or not around what the non-contractual
it
are.
splits to non-union and union,
Yeah,
basically.
Union board of selectmen, non-union board of selectmen, and then schools. Because it's a different group that makes that decision making.
I wouldn't say non-union board of selectmen, because things like the library report to library trustees.
So it's a good point.
But,
DPW.
but their salary and wages are set by the personnel director's recommendation of how much to shift the grid. So it really does break down to union personnel, which are all through the board of selectmen negotiating.
Except for the DPW, water, parks, cemeteries, and
Right, right,
public works,
but-
they're separate.
Oh,
Even though they're under the-
yeah, that's true. That's true, because.
They're under the personnel bylaw if they're not in the contract.
Right.
Well, the union negotiations,
The highway union people are still negotiated through the
we
selectmen.
negotiate those, but they're separate.
They're
the
separate.
elected water commissioners,
Right.
highway road
But do they
commissioners.
negotiate the union
No,
contracts?
no.
Yeah.
The board does, but we don't have any ultimate control over necessarily. I mean, we have control over what the final number will be. But because they're a separate appointing authority, it's just
Yeah.
very decentralized and it can be very complex.
I think ultimately,
Like that, sorry, negotiate.
Six plus the schools, but for the schools, I just sort of am a participant, I don't
Okay.
really. But I foresee us coming to agreement in the next few weeks.
It's just a question of whether it makes it to
Yeah,
the budgets or to salary reserve.
correct, but I anticipate that we'll hopefully have at least a couple of big departments resolved.
Okay. But for your purposes, Che, it's sort of split into what do the union people get and the three contract people, the three contract salary people. And then what do the non-union
Non-union.
folks?
and then schools also, but
And
it's separate.
schools,
Yeah.
I mean,
Separate,
and
yeah.
they're a bottom line budget, so.
Right.
So,
Could I ask though, when you get that, say you have that information in front of you, what do you, for this year's budget, how does that help you to decide what the next steps are for the FY19 budget?
So for FY19, I mean, ultimately, a couple things.
Longer term, it's really, we've got this Prop 2.5, and then the percentage of everybody's budget in the town that make up, comprised of all these. So when you're the FinCom and you're trying to keep things as efficient as possible, and you've got the actual salary compensation level raising much higher than that 2.5%, and it becomes to get a larger and larger percentage of the budget, the math problem just doesn't work. So then you're at, all right, how do you actually make that work? So when folks are focused on, you know, what's happened with taxes and trying to figure out that balance, it's that education of exactly what's going on. And a lot of the decisions, we're not involved in those discussions. So having some people hear our perspective of, hey, when you look at this math, we just want to see what those numbers look like so we can weigh into that broader. So I've been on the finance committee, whatever, my 6th year. We were never in those discussions, and it's always the biggest part of that slice, right? So it's more of just to see what that has actually been doing.
I think
Better
you had
articulate
worked
that?
it out, or I had the non-union piece for every 1% adjustment on the grid, it's like $25,000.
I have to redo that, because I might have
Put some,
mixed up the wrong
yeah,
one type of the other.
but it's
But
on
it's
that
minimal.
order.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple things, it's starting a conversation, because ultimately, personally, I think we need to start looking at wages and manage wages say it this way, I do think private sector does a lot of things wrong. One of the things they do though is they manage budgets by the dollar amount it's gonna cost them to live. And so they manage wages by, this is what, based on our earnings and everything, we can afford to pay next year. This is what we can afford to do. So the conversation isn't about, it becomes more real because it's a set of dollars, right or wrong. And they go back, on the flip side of that, they do go back in my case, my company, every 2 to 3 years to do a market evaluation. So there is this there is a balance between these two.
Which then can throw you out of whack.
Right. You can recognize, okay, we've been holding back, we can't do it. Similar to what happened in 2015
Right.
here.
Right.
But by having those two and being able to look at it from a budget perspective of here's the net dollars, it allows us to.
And the private sector pays really close attention to the attrition rate as
Yeah.
well as part of that discussion.
Yeah.
And raise, and promotion rate as well, in my case, in my company's promotions are controlled.
My only suggestion is that we only have a few more meetings till town meeting warrant. It was my intention as town administrator to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that for next year's budget process, that we would look at revisiting the 2015 study and evaluating our success and progress towards those goals. Because I believe that when we look at the numbers and we if we compare the marketability of our jobs, where are we? I think that we've come a long way in the past 4 years since doing that study. And I think it's worthwhile to look at that again, to see where we are, how do we compare, and does our personnel classification grid need further review or updating? So for many, many years, an average of 16 years, people like David Bond were sitting on the step 9 waiting for a COLA to come his way. Many years it was a 0. So for 16 years on average, we had long-term employees sitting waiting for a COLA to come their way. And that was the 2015-14 study that helped to address that. And I think that we've come very far since that time in addressing the marketability of the positions. I also understand what I'm hearing from you all is that a 4.8%, assuming everybody is doing their jobs and is performing well, may be unsustainable. I get that. I also understand that we want to attract, retain, and keep qualified, experienced employees working for us and not going next door because they're offering $2 more an hour. So what I'm hearing is that maybe we need to, and what I've assumed is that we need to at some point look back and say, okay, we've made a lot of progress with our existing pay structure. Now let's look at the data again and see if we're at benchmark. How maybe if we're at or beyond benchmark, maybe you need to reassess that grid again. Because that takes an awful lot of professional services experience, I would be recommending that we would set aside money to look at a classification study again and to reassess that. And to do that though in a vacuum by just using the next few weeks to determine whether or not, it may not be realistic.
This
So that's
is
the only
to
reason.
transition over the coming weeks, start the transition of the conversation away from, into some of this more.
And I would agree with you, and I would say that I completely agree with you, and I think that after we get the warrant issued and you've come up with your budget recommendations based on what we know today, which is a classification grid and a scale and a study that was done 4 years ago that is moving along quite well, what is the impact of that? And how do we use that now that we've gotten past this fiscal year to reassess before we enter into next year's budget process?
I think that's what it is, because
Right.
I think everything that you said about all that resonates as well. I mean, we've had a lot of employees that were here for, very, very long-term
Yeah.
employees retire, and then you have to replace them, and
We're starting them at a step 1 or 3 as opposed to being on step 9 again.
right,
So
but
it's
there are also all the
constant
roles
churn.
that some of those people had. They were
Yeah.
doing 4, 5, 6 roles, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
you have to have the marketability, you want to have the retention of the people, we have to have quality employees. But we also have to look at, it's the two sides of that coin,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
exactly it.
And it's a surface-based budget versus an expenses-based.
Yeah.
It's just different ways of looking at it. And
So
I
different
agree.
industries do it.
that makes sense, working that way, but I mean, for this year, at a minimum, we gotta know and understand what our wages and salaries gonna raise.
Kelly, what did that study cost a few years ago, do you recall?
I wanna say it was 12,000, but that seems on the low side. I mean, we got a lot, $12,000. I think they're going more along the lines of 20 to 25. But, you know, that's why we do an RFP, we can check around. It might not even have to be a full-blown analysis the way that we did the last one as well, because if you remember, we did job descriptions. So we did a massive overhaul. It was the first professional study we had ever done. So what we'd be looking at is specifically the pay grid and its comparability to other communities.
Is this not an effort that can be done more regionally? Why does every town have to spend 25 grand to do the same study?
Because everybody's competing with everybody for those same qualified experience.
Yeah, but I understand they are doing that, but everybody's looking to be competitive.
That's correct.
Everybody's looking for the
Yeah.
same answer.
Yeah.
If the job is worth 50 grand
It,
here and it's worth 50 grand there, that's all they want to know. And then they decide whether they're gonna overpay or underpay,
Yeah.
or pay the market to attract people. But this sounds like an expensive approach to figure out what the market rates are. There are companies out there that provide that data, that you can buy a
For
service.
municipals.
yeah, I agree,
Or
I
you can
agree.
even just benchmark the people around here. I mean, people other-
I'm just concerned about doing independent
Yeah,
studies.
you know, this is the tough decisions that you folks are asked to help with. You know, we don't have in-house staff, we don't have an HR director. Maybe Masco could help us, I don't know when they get their HR director.
I wonder
We don't have that luxury. We're on our shoestring, you're looking at your finance team,
Yeah,
it's us
I
and
know
Barbara,
the
you know?
MIT HR people, a bunch of them are spending a couple years doing a compensation study, and
Yeah.
they like to do it every 6 years or so.
The other side to that too, and I've never been shy about saying this, is that you get to a point, especially in municipal government, where you feel like, you know, the non-union employees are like so vulnerable. And you get to the point where they're like, oh, you know, we got a 2% COLA and the school's got 3, why are they picking on us, right? And I'm trying everything in my power to empower our employees to do more with less and to not go and join Ask Me, right? So I'm constantly at odds with that, you know, I'm always trying to push them to do more with less. At the same time, I'm trying to protect them from the inherent scrutiny of being a public employee where your salary and your overtime and your benefits are out there for everybody to see and to be jealous about if they make less than you, or to be upset about if they pay more in taxes and they don't think that you're deserving. So I just want to sort of throw that out there, that there's a morale issue at stake here as well, and we have to be very sensitive to the way that we package this and we say, we're looking at the entire system, we're not just looking at non-union.
I absolutely agree with that, and that's why I think we need the schools as well, and the union and everything else. You know, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying there. I think the issue is right now, you know, information is out there in false or accurate or inaccurate, but it's many information. The only way to address that is to have the accurate information out there.
Right.
And so getting that and sharing it, I mean, I've tried to do it myself a couple of times, and every time, you know, my numbers have swung.
Well, to that point though, I want to let everyone know, there's no big secrets here. I have a public records request asking for FY17 wages for the fiscal year and the calendar year. I'm trying to get to that, but you know, we're dealing with a $30 million budget. So I haven't been able to put everything aside to focus on that. When I'm able to do that, that will hopefully give you a little bit more information to go on. But what it also does though is, again, it sets everybody's eyes on, oh, look at how much they're making. And the bottom line is that the contracts that we're trying to negotiate right now are mostly based on positions that have 1 hourly rate of pay and don't have any steps. And then the non-union ones are ones based on a system that's been approved by the Board of Selectmen, has been reviewed by a public, you know, consulting company. And so we're trying to be fair, we're trying to be marketable. I'm suggesting that maybe we need to look at that, see how far we've come, to reassess, and to see if there's a cost-effective way for us to make sure that we are still in line, and to see if maybe our grid needs to be adjusted. Maybe instead of having 11 steps, maybe we need to have a minimum, a mid, and a max, and have less increments of increases. So I'm open to that, and whether, you know, I think that we have to do something like that outside of the house, not internally. But I'd be open to that. I'm just sort of a little bit nervous about the reality of coming up with all the information. But to my original point, everything is disclosed in that document that is published online. It will show you by department. This is what was in it for last year, this is what was voted.
Right.
It actually shows you 16, 17, what was voted for 18, and what's proposed for 19. So anybody who really wants to know that information has it right at their fingertips and right on the website.
No, so
So, I can just make a comment. I don't think, I can speak for myself, I don't think this committee is at all interested in looking at individual salaries, et cetera. That was done by you, by experts, by the consulting
Yeah.
contract. I'm personally fine with that. I think I'm hearing John and Shay say, and what I'm interested in is to place in buckets the union, the non-union,
Totally.
Yeah.
those 3 or 4
Okay.
buckets, whatever they are.
See what the aggregate.
And
Yeah.
see, if one group is making 4% advances or 5% advances a year, another's getting 3.8% a
Right.
year,
That's right.
that's something we need to understand,
Okay.
because eventually they get way out of whack when you do
Yeah.
that. And the other thing I think that we're interested in is if we've got 80% of our budget, and I don't know what salaries and wages are, but
It is.
it is.
It's about
pretty,
Yeah.
80% of our
Yeah.
budget is a 4.8% annual growth rate.
Mm.
If that, and I'm making these numbers up,
Yeah,
but if
yeah.
if those are the numbers, that means 20%.
Has to be
I think it has to be a negative number.
It does.
Right.
But
Just to get to
it dropped
3.
2.5.
That's algebra.
To hit 2.5, you just have to cut every year, that's
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, and we can't speak articulately about that without facts and data. And I think that's the question that we're asking for, is if you can help provide us the facts and data,
Right.
then we can define the problem, we can communicate the problem, and maybe there's some brilliance between us and town hall and the selectmen that says, well, here's the solution.
To add to that, it would be helpful for future negotiations for you as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
The only immediate issue that I see though, that's, in terms of, I don't think there's gonna be any new information, because the unions that were not negotiated during this time are still not negotiated, they're still in negotiations. So, so right now, the FY19 budget is carrying the salary of FY17. So if I'm comparing FY18 and FY19, I'm still comparing FY17 to FY17, based on what the numbers I
Yeah.
have. So I'm not sure how to work that piece of it. It's
Yeah.
not, they're not
But they-
updated.
Well, but they move, but every year they move. I mean, you may not have next year's, but when you did negotiations in 17, it didn't say you're gonna get a raise in 17 and nothing in 18. It said it was gonna be 17 and 18. There'd be a 2% one year
The
and
contracts right now that are being negotiated are for FY18.
18. Okay, yeah, to look back.
Yeah, they're for
Yeah.
FY18, so we're right now working on preparing FY18 retroactive, you know, just getting those ready for when the contracts are signed. So it's FY18 retroactive and moving into FY19. And that's also why, just as a placeholder, you see 200,000 in salary reserve, because last year there was 100,000 that was in there, and the only way I could see to actually move that money forward was to put 200 in FY19, because it's just a placeholder.
Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you, what you're saying is that in last year you said, okay, since we haven't completed a contract for the year we're about to go into,
Yeah.
we're gonna put 100,000 aside. We're now finishing the first of those 2 years, so when you're doing your contract, you're actually gonna be for last year and the year we're going into.
So
And
when
so
you,
you're saying, okay, we put 100,000 aside last year, thinking that for last year, it was gonna cost us $100,000, whatever, in salary increases. Now we put this year, you're saying you put 200,000, one to reflect that we're gonna have to pay out $100,000 additional for last year. And
For the current year, right.
And another 100,000 for the current year.
so if I collate these numbers a little bit differently, you're still looking at FY17 to FY17,
For-
where what you're asking for is FY18 and FY19, and I don't have
Don't
those
exist.
numbers.
Well, what I'm thinking is to that, and that's where you're having the number out to the side,
But we can impute that between 17 and 19.
yeah, having the number out to the side and saying, here are the contracts that aren't that are placeholders, and knowing that, we can then put some assumptions around that and put that in. It's not gonna be right, but it
Just,
helps
I
decision-making.
think I looked at just what was in the salary and wage lines for the FY18 proposed that's been approved versus this FY17 approved, just the town meeting budgets. And gee, FY18 wasn't hardly up at all over FY17, but that's because there was $100,000 just sitting there in salary reserve.
Did that salary reserve go somewhere?
It
Once,
sits in a reserve.
once,
It
no,
sits in-
once the budget, once the contracts are approved, that money will actually get budgeted into a line item, and this was the issue that the police chief was having, because it looks like his increase is more, but what will happen is his money will also roll up into his actual line item. You can't spend directly out of a salary reserve line item, you can
That's
only
transferred.
move money from it,
Okay.
kinda like the reserve fund.
Sure, I just wait, but we have 100,000, was that sitting somewhere, and now we're adding
Yes.
200,000 more?
No,
to it?
adding 100,000.
No.
Adding 100,000.
Listen,
Okay,
these are
but this,
great,
because there's
And
200,000
those
in
are
the
just
salary.
really
reserve.
rough numbers.
these
I mean,
are great,
for-
these are great conversations to have from a planning and strategy perspective, but that's not gonna help us over the next 3 weeks in
Right.
terms of voting the numbers that are in front of
Voting.
us right now. We have no control over what's already done.
Except for it's not done.
It's not done, right?
Well,
There are a couple of recommendations.
This,
Yeah.
There are a couple of recommendations. We've got a couple of contracts that are being asked to be done, and they're not done yet, but they're being done by the deciding boards. And we have an ask in here for an update for COLA and for the grid, the steps, the adjustment to the grid. That's all.
that's
and-
the only thing that's baked into this omnibus budget is the proposed 2% adjustment for
Right.
cost of living to the grid.
Yeah, it's the COLA number that we can twist, or the
Well,
town
well,
can
but,
adjust.
and understand off of that, you've got that, and then you also have the step, what does the steps do? I mean, we inherently know there are steps, but I don't have any sense of what.
Each step is worth 2.75%.
But how many people really get
But how many,
steps?
that's, yeah.
We don't know, like, how much of the overall
Yeah, I-
salary townwide
Well,
are
you
on?
go through that
I think
list.
if you look department by department
Yeah.
at the details, you'll see
Yeah.
where somebody's topped out.
You can infer it, if the
Yeah.
department's small enough.
Yeah, which
And
most of
the,
them are.
the grid is actually the first thing you voted as you entered the budget season as part of the guidelines.
Well, we told people that the guideline was with salaries and wages as negotiated and with personnel director's recommendation, but a guideline's never a promise
Right.
that we
Right.
can actually
We
afford it.
Yeah.
But I think with that 2%, that's like $40,000. So if push came to shove and you couldn't balance the budget any other way, you'd say, well, guess we aren't doing
Yeah.
cost of living adjustment to the grid. And if you wanted to go even more drastic, you'd say 0%, nobody moves a step, nobody gets a cost of living adjustment, everybody sits where they are. Which means that your grid's not keeping up with the times. And your non-union people are falling behind what the union
Right.
get for their negotiations. And some of, the teacher's contract is, we know what that is because they're going into year 3. They're in year 2 right now. So we know what they're doing, and that's part of the issue with the school budget, is they have a contractual increase they need to pay. Cover it by just increasing the budget more than the guideline, or by not having as many people. The schools maybe have a little more natural ebb and flow in terms of senior people retiring or moving, and a younger person coming in for cheaper. But they don't get that every year, because they've only got like 50 positions.
we don't have control of
No,
Well, we don't have control of any one of those, just,
Right.
yeah. What we
Especially-
have is, we have the ability to recommend and or understand, and then we have,
Highlight trends that are unsustainable.
Yeah.
you know, and then, share that information with the boards that do.
it.
And that's what we're trying to do, so.
Absolutely.
Where we're at is just, if we can get some wages, those numbers, and then look at them.
yeah, they're out there with all those caveats.
Yeah,
The contractual ones aren't necessarily settled, and so you're not looking at what you think you are.
right, well, that's,
Yeah.
and making sure we understand which ones are not, those are.
Okay, so, that's a long way around to voting budgets. there are, Catherine's spreadsheet has a summary tab, so we can go department by department if you want, or since we've been through all the budgets as liaisons and certain budgets having people in here, we can vote it as presented, as we've been using.
And if there's anybody that wants to pull anything out, pull it out.
Yeah. Like, I would suggest pulling the police out while we straighten out, that's gotta be one of the more complicated budgets.
I'm pulling out police, fire, and schools.
Yeah.
Fire also?
I thought that's what somebody said.
I hadn't seen a revised budget since the last round of negotiations.
There hasn't been anything revised, nothing's.
Oh,
No, we'd be voting the base
The base.
budget
Right, right.
So
with,
it-
subject to revision
So it could be
if and
fire.
when contracts are.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only concern with the police was they were passing things out that I'm not sure how much it was reflected in the January 3rd document. And the January 3rd document is the published one that we've all been talking about.
And the next version of the budget will have the police updated, which we're looking at Thursday to distribute.
Does everyone recall what's been pulled out from all their budgets over the last 2 months? Should we wait for that next updated budget? Before we vote on anything?
But the base budgets were mostly all in line, it was the exceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're,
Yeah.
so we're,
Not approving the exceptions.
when the base budget is literally, it's the base budget that conforms to guidelines in every single situation.
even, for example, the trash, which is in the base budget, it conforms to guideline, even though we know there's a contractual increase. Just, it does.
The only budgets that there've been changes to in terms of this base has been the selectman's office, the police, and the council on aging, and that two items totaling $800,000 were omitted, so there was a move around from that.
800,000?
I'm sorry, $800. $800. It has to do with moving 390 from one line to, and doing it as a, it's for the annual contract that she has for the software that she bought last year.
Okay. I like 800.
But even with the council on aging, it's not a change in the bottom line, it's just because that's been added to the sheet here. The above guidelines.
Right, the base budget's the same, that's another add
So
to the above and beyond.
the police moved some things around, and then the new executive assistant in the Board of Selectmen's office was shown as being proposed in FY19 as 56,680, and the actual is 63,212. Under, she was hired at a grade 6, step 9.
Different experience level,
Which is a different, yes, exactly.
same grade, different step, different experience.
So for voting budgets tonight, does that mean we're accepting this 2% COLA or recommending it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's the way people build their budget.
Right,
because-
no, you're right, that puts us in a 3.56% Article 3rd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if we don't accept the COLA, we're
Yeah.
saving $40,000,
Yeah, no,
which is $40,000, but
right, no,
it's not the bulk of the 3.85%,
Okay, yeah.
I think.
But the reality is, in voting through where we are now, and that conversation, I'm not objecting to it particularly because we can revisit them.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know, and I do really, and I would be pushing to revisit them if we can't see those numbers. In some respect, at a minimum, I want to see them start the conversation for next week.
Sure. insurance is level, we're still at a dollar increase
Right,
of 600-ish thousand.
Yeah.
A chunk of it's the elementary schools.
Yeah, the OPEB, right now, the recap is still driven by benefits.
Schools.
Yeah, and school.
And to some extent, the debt service. Yeah, okay, well, if you want Mike to produce an Article 3 vote tracker and so that the numbers are all laid out and try to come up with the salaries and wage comparison that Jay was looking for, and vote it next week, we can do that too. Once it's all laid out.
I kinda think we don't have a lot of time, so I think
Yeah.
we should vote it, because it's gonna be able to be overridden by a following vote
If we
needed.
have to.
I think we know that there's that potential $33,000 lever if we need that to balance the budgets, and I also think that we know that those amounts aren't gonna get to be recut for this year other than the COLA number.
Right.
Right, and everybody's gonna get us the data to have that longer term conversation, so I just think it's gonna be hard enough to get through all the warrant stuff and everything else that we need to, and then, right, because what's gonna happen is all the stuff above, we're gonna have to see how many items above guideline are there, what's the delta we're trying to solve for. Other pieces of information will come in the next week or two, and we'll clear the picture, right? That's generally what happens.
Does that number include free cash?
No.
Free
So-
cash is,
That's one of the last votes we
Yeah,
do.
that's one of the last votes.
That's the last night of jiggering to figure out,
Right.
what do we need to do what with what.
Yeah, we have.
That was
it's not
our-
free cash.
That was our midnight or 1 in the morning night.
Last year.
yeah, the contractual amounts that are over guidelines is 29,000. And the some other things like equipment maintenance or repair and maintenance contract increases, that's 29,000. And then new items, the clerk software and part-time position, that's also
So none of that's in the base budget?
20,000. Yeah.
None of that's in the base budget,
Right.
so.
So in the
So,
end,
I'll-
it's like 100,000 out there on, that we'll need to decide on
To decide on.
for beyond guidelines.
Right, so, yeah, the over guidelines are fixed and contractual is in the base, but the others is not.
It's the unemployment insurance or the pensions, well, yeah, those are
So-
in the base.
So I'll make a motion that we move to approve on and vote on the base budgets with the exceptions of elementary school, police, and NASCO.
And insurance, because we
insurance.
don't.
This is the omnibus budget dated January 3rd.
Dated January 3rd, that's right.
I'd say that again, with the exception of police,
Yep.
schools,
NASCO?
Insurance.
Insurance,
insurance.
and NASCO.
That's what's separate, isn't
Yeah, mass,
Yeah,
mass two
it's-
separate, so
it's-
both sets.
Both sets are out. We're
It's
we're just
not-
being super clear that we're not voting on either.
Yeah, it's not
That's-
in the omnibus.
That's right. And to be able to be superseded by following votes. By following
it?
votes.
So this is Article 3rd.
Yeah.
Well, second.
So all that is it's our guidelines of the base budget plus the COLA.
And things that are given to us, like Essex County retirement, where
Correct,
it
correct.
is what it is.
Change the discount rate on hurt us last year.
Okay, further discussion. And it is the base budgets which show up in the summary tab of the January 3rd omnibus. Further discussion.
Well,
Okay.
I think I have to just, I think we hear a lot of the stuff
Yeah, that are.
that's on our mind. Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, that's the base, and Mike, you'll make a vote tracker and
We can vote tracker
We
and
have another
get it to you
year's.
by Friday. Check.
yeah, because then Jen can print it.
Okay, sure. Yeah. That would be good.
What other, Kelly, what other pieces of information are we gonna learn to give us a more clear vision of the budget for the next 2 or 3 weeks?
The health insurance was the biggest piece.
Right. And what date
And
does
whether or
that
not
come
we
in,
can
you think?
finalize, what? I'm sorry,
Health?
excuse me.
Oh, it did?
You missed it.
Oh,
That was done just before you walked in.
Oh, really?
zero
Zero.
No
on the,
way.
on the health insurance. That
Not
saves
your good things
200.
happen.
You tell me I should stay out next week. Well,
Yeah,
that's
I'm
good.
sorry, I thought you would come in just,
Yeah.
just
I
before
missed the
that.
punchline.
Yeah.
So are there other pieces of information that we know, or do we kind of have the picture right in front of us right now?
I think we have a lot of the pieces now that the health insurance piece is done. I mean, the other piece that I've already sent an email to our insurance rep, I mean, that's the other insurance pieces that we don't really have. I mean, it's not gonna add up to
The
a lot,
liability and-
but we can refine our assumptions so that hopefully it will definitely go down with regard to like property casualty insurance. Our workers' comp will definitely be going up. So the issue there was workers' comp is going up, but the other ones might be coming down. It might be a wash.
Workers, oh no, it's unemployment. We
Set
set a
the
special
unemployment
fund
fund,
for it.
yeah.
So to the extent we haven't used that, we don't need to add.
Part of the
or don't
warrant
need to
article.
add
It's a
much.
warrant it's a separate
Yeah.
warrant article, right. So it's really the schools, that I can tell, is really some of the
Well,
final
staff.
pieces. But even the health insurance on our end
Yeah.
is anticipated that that'll help our Masco number as well, because they're also in the Maya plan. And I know that they did get a very favorable rate for next year.
So something I'd like to request is, in advance of our, the final meeting, because that's the day we do all the balancing,
Yeah,
is looking
yeah.
at, our various FinCom accounts, stabilization fund, but look at it over time as a percentage of that year's approved budget. So if the stabilization fund was X,
Yeah.
and the total budget was Y, X divided by Y is what percent? I'd love to see how those percentages switch
Benchmarks.
over time, because
Yeah.
that'll help us
Yeah.
somewhat figure out.
I'm trying to think if I've done it already.
We have some guidelines
We do.
too
Can we-
Well-
from the study, right?
Yeah, but I don't think those are tuned.
They're not tuned to our town, it's just saying that we need to come up with things like that, but.
DUR just came out with a new municipal analytics and municipal database. I've downloaded a bunch of charts and graphs that compare with other towns, but they use a lot of the same benchmarks that we'd be looking at, and those also tie into our policy development process. So we'll be looking to refine those.
Right.
So if there were a couple of key areas that you wanted me to focus on, such as, the amount of OPEB or the amount of stabilization or whatever those key benchmarks are, maybe we could pick 3 or 4 of them. I could get those, produce those for you for one of your
Yeah.
future meetings, if that would be helpful.
If you just want versus town meeting approved tax levy, I think I could do that fairly quickly. I think I've got a few years of history on the stabilization balance. I don't have a lot, you guys have more.
I think what you're looking for is what are the benchmarks that you see for stabilization
Right.
funds across the Commonwealth?
How do we compare?
Where do
And
we
how do we
stand,
compare?
and where do we wanna go?
And where were we
And-
historically?
And where were we
Where
historically?
we were historically.
Because we know we know some of those dollar amounts, but to know that what we're from a percentage standpoint, it's just some, I mean, I would think we would wanna look at that before we decide what goes away.
I have that information, I can get that for you.
Yeah.
It also.
The reserves, the stabilization funds, the reserves, our OPEB contributions, and
Yeah.
the percent
Those are
of
super helpful.
personnel compared to overall budget.
Those are
or-
perfect.
Okay, I'll just
That's a good
pull a
starting
handful.
point at least, so.
So
Yeah.
I think it's, the timing isn't right to set a strategy and.
We're not setting the policy,
I know.
I agree, or the guideline.
But I think what we should do is know which direction we're going. If we think that the percentage should be higher than where we are,
Right.
we want to be very knowledgeable, aware of that when we make that decision.
That's what I'm saying, so at the end, when we're sitting there, do we add 100 grand versus 50 grand to one account? This might make it clear that, oh, you don't need to do 100 grand, 50 grand is more than adequate, because,
But we say that because we've always had $500,000 in the account, like it's just a $500,000, and that doesn't make any sense.
this doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense, exactly right.
Yeah, no, we did start over the past several years saying, okay, the minimum free cash balance shouldn't just sit there at 500,000
Right.
forever and ever. That was fine when the tax levy was 15 million, but we're more than that now.
But what we don't know is what's the average in the Commonwealth, or what's the top tier in the Commonwealth, and how far away are we from that, or are we there?
Yeah.
We don't know
Yeah.
that.
If you recall though, it directly relevant to what you're talking about. If you recall, a few years back, we were looking at, should we continue to contribute $100,000 a year to the general stabilization fund? And so what we did is we analyzed what was in there compared to what the benchmark is. And from that dialogue came the decision to start the capital stabilization fund, so that we could be then directing funds into the capital, knowing that we were going to have this infusion of more funds into our capital. So that was a really great way to make that determination that we should reallocate instead of putting money into general stabilization, that it could be directed and targeted to the capital stabilization fund. So I have that information, and I will get that to you,
Awesome,
so that
thank
you can use that in order to decide what those other reserve contributions will be.
The historical references too, I mostly have, but are you looking for it, usually they do it towards the recap equalized value, are you looking for it towards the budget, against the budget?
Just some apples to apples.
Yeah.
So do you want the budget, those?
Whatever the state does for their benchmark.
Okay, all right, good.
I'm just talking about something that makes it from a percentage standpoint, that's comparable. So it's comparable to the towns, comparable year over year, it's not just a dollar, that's all I'm asking, sorry.
Yeah, because I mean, the FinCom does have an old guideline that says you should have $1 million in the stabilization fund, which is nice, but that was,
But why?
yeah.
Loosely followed,
Yeah.
it's more of the rule
And,
of thumb, it's rule of thumb.
and we're over that now, and we should be, because that was
That's-
8 years ago, and.
That's right.
But $1 million today isn't what it was back then.
But, yeah, it would be nice to just sort of see what standard deviation are.
Yeah, and I don't
Yeah.
think, we didn't necessarily
Yeah.
get conscientious about it.
Okay,
But I
right.
think these days with the Commonwealth having more information.
Yeah.
I think
Everybody.
we can do something. I think the other point is if we're going out to bond for more, you want to make sure that you still look like you're financially conscientious with your reserves.
Right. Mhm. You could just look at the S&P rating to see what those benchmarks are that they look at.
Yeah.
And they're all the things that you were just talking about.
That's right. More homework for us today.
I have lots of information on this, so I'm happy to get it to
Thank
you
you.
and get it off of my plate and have you guys discuss it.
Okay. In fact, speaking of OPEB, is there anything, sorry, Jay, that you wanted to say that you've gleaned?
Not yet. I need to, actually, I was gonna grab you guys at the end and see what we talked this week. Probably
Besides,
gonna open. Started that a month or two ago. Out of pocket.
you've been in India, and, yeah,
No, I just, anyway, so I'm hoping later.
okay. We know it's a looming issue,
Yes.
and we're nowhere near
I
fully
think,
funded.
I think this year, the only thing the conversation comes into play of when we talk about stabilization fund, reserve funds and
Mhm.
stabilization.
And if there
Can't
is
help that piece.
free cash,
Exactly.
could sit there and earn a little interest as opposed to sitting in free cash, well. Yeah. Okay. So budget review approval,
Just the one thing, just if I can, real fast, for
Yep.
everyone to remember, it's not the size of the number that, as scary as that number would or wouldn't be, it's what it does year over year over year. Because it's such a long run out that if a $15 million number looks, oh my God, scary, but that's over 60 years, because you're starting from your youngest employee and they're 40 years of working, and then plus your oldest employee on that. So when we do start talking those numbers, remember, it's, the first and foremost is let's make sure if we're doing this year over year over year, it means we're treading water, which is actually not a horrible place. If we're, meaning if,
We're getting worse every year, Stan.
yeah, we're getting worse every year.
You're not covering your service costs.
Right.
So interest
Right now-
costs and service costs associated with the liability.
right now, we're paying for the people who are retired. And retiree insurance and whatever other pension benefits. And
It's really healthcare.
They provided us with the financial audit last week as well, and they're printing right now, but I can send those to you immediately if you want computerized instead of the hard copy. But they have a lot of disclosures about the OPEB this year because they're in two different years between the statement and the disclosure for the OPEB based on the Gatsby's.
Yeah, but because they switched the accounting
They're
change.
switching, there's accounting changes going on there. So I can send those by email, they'll also be up on the website, so. That and the actuarial was done for years FY 18 and 19. They do it every 2 years.
And there's a nominally must be funded by, fully funded by date of, it
There's no
keeps moving out.
There's no mandatory.
There isn't a mandatory,
There's not
it's something
anymore?
that,
That's the problem with public plans versus corporate plans. There's no
There was some
mandatory type.
push that by the year
yeah, it's gone.
2025 or something, you had to be fully funded, but that's good.
There's not an enforcement of
We're
anything.
struggling because you
Can't.
can't tell them.
Everybody.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
No, this is
Across the
right.
state.
The whole-
It's
the whole
nationwide.
country.
Yeah, it's
Country.
nationwide.
The whole country,
Okay.
Yeah.
pension and health and welfare.
The state and most of the
Public
towns
plans
in the
are
Commonwealth, they're
decimated.
like at 1 or 2% of nominal fully funded.
Yeah.
For the state, it's a
That makes me
$16
feel
billion
better.
problem.
You can't close the
You're in a
gap.
hole with everyone
Yeah,
else,
right.
you're not alone.
You can't close the gap without significant raise in taxes to cover the contribution or just cutting benefits.
And there's a legal limit to, right now, a legal limit to what you could cut, not,
The
and there's also moral conversation.
markets aren't
gonna
take care of it.
I mean,
The
let's
markets
be
won't take you
fair.
out of the trouble.
No,
Yeah.
so Illinois and New Jersey will do this.
Oh, yeah, they're going down. Chicago, police, Chicago fire, 10% funded.
Okay, well, with department budget review, I think in the, keep checking with your liaison departments, there are updates to their beyond guidelines or even their base. And we can start discussing the beyond guidelines. Also, maybe deal with some of those next week, as well as the picture becomes clearer on what the schools are doing, where that's going to leave us with the bottom line. So turning to warrant articles, there is a proposed list of articles, which,
You sent 2 files out, they're pretty much the same except.
yeah, one's a PDF and one's a
One's
Word.
got the list, the
Yeah,
breakdown.
and yeah. Given my life this weekend, I did not bring copies, I apologize.
I just have copies of the header sheet with the list, if that's.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
that'd be
list
great.
would
There's
be-
the list.
Yeah.
I didn't bring
Yeah.
the list, I just brought the actual words.
And we're probably a little ways away from,
Yeah, you have to listen.
Finally.
List.
yeah.
Okay.
If you pass the spares, no.
money.
Yeah,
Because
you have one, right? Just make sure it's the same budget.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the other half?
Instructions for administration stuff.
I printed this out.
It's the same
Right.
thing.
She doesn't have any copies of that.
Yeah.
Change this
Plenty
pursuant to
more.
Massachusetts law.
Yeah. Is it the same one?
Okay, so I ran down the list and just tried in my head, sketching out who would do what, and came up that Lou had twice as many as anybody else.
Must have a lot of free time.
Seems to be a lot of zoning.
And John and Eric had almost nothing.
Oh, on the warrant articles?
Yeah, and so, you know,
I got fire engine repairs and protective equipment,
and that's it,
that's it.
yeah. So,
Did you mark them on there?
no, I just marked them on mine because I wanted to have a thought in my head when we talked about it going down. If we run down the list, starting with annual town meeting reports, additionally, the chair gives the FinCom report. Authorization to transfer balances, which is, it was new last year, taking certain receipts and making them available for then appropriation in Article 3. It could be Mike, could be anybody who needs a little more microphone time.
No, I don't think we have any.
I don't know, you guys wanna fight over it?
Just.
Typically, I would give Article 3 to Mike, since he has the model.
Sure.
So,
There and see where we end up.
yeah,
We're unbalanced.
Yeah, I mean, typically I have Article 3 and nothing else, so if you want someone else to get up there and say it.
oh,
Yeah,
I
I could do
think,
that.
you've got some things with the town clerk this year.
Okay, that's
and-
true. Yep, and the plastic bags.
Yes.
Take the best for last. Right,
Yeah. Yeah, we can come back to Article 2.
Okay.
If Eric or John feel the need. Let's see, the water department operating would usually be Lou.
I'll do two, I don't care.
Okay, yeah,
I'm not a shy person.
okay. And then Dana gets the Masco articles and Essex, North Shore. So there's 3 for Dana right there. Grant authorizations, selectmen authorizing, and I'm their liaison, so it could be me.
It's a consent agenda, okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, these next bit, we might never have to talk. Lou would get 9 and 10 as highway and park and cemetery. And John would get tri-town council, and Dana would get senior care. And then Shay would get the compensated absences, unemployment, special indemnity leave, if anything gets pulled out there.
Yeah, let's just talk a little bit about what possibly could get pulled out.
The special indemnity leave fund, that's the first time this is on the warrant, right?
Last year was on as a new fund.
Did we fund it last year?
Yes, it was, yes, we funded it every year. And there was a new appropriation, it was definitely transferred from the police department.
The numbers on the first consent don't seem to merit pulling out, but I know there was some discussion at the last time meeting about using consents and not using consents.
Yeah, I mean, these typically are boilerplate ones and small dollar ones, so it wouldn't surprise me if